My name is Anne Marie Byers, and I am from the Wildgrass neighborhood. It's another one of the impacted neighborhoods over by Anthem Ranch and Anthem Highlands. And our HOA created a oil and gas committee because our residents actually own our mineral rights. And so we created this group to figure out actually what that means and as this goes forward. And in that process, we actually discovered that there's a lot more than our mineral rights at stake, and so this project has expanded, and we're trying to work with the industry to make sure that as this project goes forward, it is the best oil and gas development for all of Broomfield. So some of our concerns, whoops, am I going the wrong way? Yes, I'm going to do lorries again. Are the same as what we've been hearing from all of you as we've reached out to the community. We're concerned about the health and safety of this project. We're concerned about the noise levels and air quality and the water quality. We're also concerned about the traffic and road conditions, and we're concerned about due process for mineral rights owners in the area, ourselves included, but there's also other mineral rights owners. With the air quality, the reason why we're concerned about that is not just for the neighbors right in the infected area, but air quality from these type of developments actually affects local, global, and regional and globally. So Northwest Colorado is already in an ozone non-attainment area, so we have to be very careful with what we do with our environment here to make sure that we don't add to that. A lot of people have talked to you today about volatile organic compounds, and that's not the only thing that will affect when these projects come in. And we need to know what all the sources are for the different compounds, including the toxic chemicals and the volatile organic compounds that will come from this project. It doesn't mean that we're against oil and gas development. We're not. We're literally trying to say what is the smartest way for this to happen and the safest way for our residents. But we need to look at truck and gas emissions from the truck traffic. That's going to happen. That there's no way for this project not to happen with some truck traffic. We need to look at that for our roads and also the dust and emissions that it causes. If there's going to be compressor engines used, that causes a problem with VOCs and emissions. And the storage tanks and burners. And that is part of what Extraction was trying to tell you, which is what they're talking about is a closed system, and that's why we've been pressing for that, is because with that closed system, you won't have this kind of VOCs because the tanks are one of the worst suppliers of VOCs, which is why we're urging everyone to press for this closed system, have the pipelines in place before any of the drilling. So far, Extraction is saying that's what they want as well, but we want to make sure that there's no loophole for economic feasibility with this because it's a big deal if we don't have these storage tanks. Again, this is just a picture showing the entire ozone non-attainment area of which we are a part. These are the chemicals that, when you were saying VOCs, from the left over to the right, these are VOCs that are increasing chemical reactivity. Not every one of these is part of every gas and oil development project. Some of them are, and as you get to the air toxics, that's something nobody has talked about tonight. Whether or not those are going to be as in this development is something else we need to look at. If there's going to be monitoring for that, we want it at baseline to see if we already have this in our environment. We want it throughout the continued process and beyond after production. These are things right now Extraction is saying they're willing to do, and we just want to make sure that we're part of that process, that it's a neutral monitoring, that we understand where the monitoring is coming from, how much it's going to cost, and how this will go on if when extraction's done. This is something, when Extraction was saying it was going to reduce the VOCs, I have to believe that's because they're going to take out the existing tanks, because the Colorado Department of Health did this anthropologic study in 2011. It said that out of all of the VOCs in Colorado, 54% comes from oil and gas, and of that 54%, 79% comes from the tanks. Again, if we're having a closed system, that takes care of a large percentage of that, which is why we're pressing for this closed system with the pipeline. It has to happen. So what do we want with all of this testing? What do we want to have come out of the comprehensive task force is a question we're asked again and again. And quite honestly, we can't say what is the number of wells we'd like, what is the number of emissions we'd like. We're all lay people from the community. We have no idea. But what we would like to see is that this comprehensive task force is supported by experts in the field and is data-driven. Any kind of recommendations that they come up with are data-driven. We cannot pick out of a hat what we would like just one well or no wells on Lowell and 100 on Sheridan, et cetera, because we need to know what is going to work for extraction. They have a right to drill, as we know, but we also have a right to have a healthy living environment. If we can work together to have that happen, I think that's what we're all going to have to aim for. And I know there's people who are saying you just don't want this in the community, but right now what we need to do is work together to see how we can do this best in the healthiest way possible, and that only way we can do that is to have experts in the community come and tell us how many wells can be on each pad in a healthy way when it's 500 feet away from one community, the next one's a little closer, and then the next two are further away. We can't guess because we're lay people. I think this has been covered, but the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission is the COGCC everyone keeps talking about. They are the regulators of Colorado oil and gas, and they're charged with fostering the responsible development of Colorado's oil and gas natural resources in a manner that's consistent with protecting our public health. And that is what we're asking them tonight to please look at some of the things that have been going on with the current regulations. The 600 series are what covers the setbacks. So schools and hospitals have a 1,000-foot setback. Urban areas and rural areas have 500-foot setback. But there's an exemption to these setbacks, and that's if the only requirement is to show that it's economically feasible. That might have worked when these rules were first put in place before large-scale residential drilling was in place, but you can't have that now if you're not going to balance that out with some sort of data to show us that that's safe. It can't just be economically feasible. It must also be safe for the residents. Also, COGCC Rule 604 says that any multi-well production facility that's proposed near a residential area has to be shown to be as far away from homes as possible. That's where you get into the alternative site analysis. And Extraction has said they've done an alternative site analysis, and we are asking our City Council to show us that, or at least if it's a proprietary document for them to review this alternative site analysis with the task force to make sure that we have chosen the site that is as far away from homes as possible. If it hasn't been done, then that's one of the necessary things for this task force to do is an alternative site analysis. Because this is what we have right now. All of these green dots are current permits with the COGCC. And quite honestly, as far as I know, the COGCC has not ever denied a permit. So if all of these things are going in, these are not all as far away from homes as possible. And this is our current plan, as you've seen quite often. And our question is this Lowell and Sheridan pad really as far away from homes as possible in Broomfield? And maybe it is, but again, the question to us is we need the information. This community is asking you. We are sophisticated, intelligent people. We're not trying to be activists or extremists. We're literally saying, is that the best plan? Is this as far away from our homes as possible? And is this the safest way to conduct this project? On a totally separate topic, I've been asked a lot of questions about what forced pooling is, given that we own our mineral rights in Wildgrass and some people in Anthem and Highlands. Forced pooling in Colorado right now means that when there is a person in a spacing unit that owns rights to drill, and the person next to them, this was designed when there used to be vertical drills like I'm showing in this picture here. There's two people next to each other, and this person wants to drill, this person doesn't, and the person in Site A is going to necessarily end up taking some of Site B's minerals. We don't want Site B to be able to say, no, you're not going to be able to monetize your minerals. So they let them do the drilling, and they have to give them compensation. Here's a better picture of what has been cited to us many times is there's a non-consenting owner between two consenting owners. Both of these people on either sides want to drill. All three own their minerals, and the person in the middle says no. If that were the case, the drill operator would not be able to drill. They'd only be able to go to the west and not both ways. But this rules, again, are for vertical drilling. This makes sense, or even maybe the original hydraulic fracturing projects, which were not going 2.5 miles. Because what we have here, if you look at the Lowell pad, they're drilling literally a mile away from that pad to get to a whole non-consenting operators, a whole non-consenting neighborhood. And in between there are more non-consenting pieces, parcels. So the issue here is when you have that, what does that mean for non-consenting mineral owners? When we sit down at the table to negotiate, it basically says, would you like this lease that I'm offering you, or would you like me to take your minerals through forced pooling? And that is the negotiation that's been had thus far. This is a property right. This is not a partisan issue. This is not a climate change issue. This is not an environmental issue. It's strictly property rights issue. Property rights are one of the fundamental values of the United States Constitution. Our founding fathers basically put this entire country on the saying that it was as close to the rules of God. We can't just give eminent domain to corporations because it's oil and gas. All we're asking here is not to say you may never do this, because once again, I understand they have a right to drill as well. They have a right to monetize their minerals. What we're asking for is a balance. We want to increase the forced pooling notice from 35 to 90 days to give people due process, because this is a property right. In addition to requiring operators to give reasonable offers, we need to show that they actually had good faith negotiations with mineral rights owners. And other states actually have a threshold where you would need to show that you reached a majority interest in any space, and that once you have that majority interest, you can force pool the minority. And that would be much easier, fair way to do a due process taking of property rights if you're going to allow an individual company to do that. In this state, we also have a cost penalty for any person that is force pooled, which means in addition to being force pooled, you actually have fines, penalties, and costs on the well for avoidable accidents. So this is something that needs to change regardless of what other pieces happen on the force pooling. If you already didn't want to consent on it, you should not then be responsible for costs, fines, or penalties. Two other things that we have on here are more amorphous, and we maybe talk offline, but these reasons why I'm being so specific here for you is we'd like your support with the legislators to try to help us get this forced pooling statutes passed, and each time you call, they ask you, what exactly is it that you want? And these are the talking points that we are giving you. So the one thing we'd like from COGCC is if we could have a new rulemaking session, which I understood was maybe in the air, to look at, this time, large-scale residential drilling, specific rules and for large-scale residential drilling, to balance the operators' interests with the residents' interests. No more waivers for economic reasons, and no more experiments on residential areas. And now I'll turn it over to Dr. Susan Spieth.